so much for joining us this afternoon during your lunch hour. We really appreciate you spending your time with us. My name is Sarah Keh, and I lead the philanthropic work at Prudential. I'm sure many of you are familiar, but we are a global financial services company that's really focused on solving the financial challenges of a changing world. And our work really focuses on how do we ensure that more people in more places are financially secure. And the topic that we're going to talk about today is how do some ownership pathways lead to financial security and ultimately dignity in your retirement. And so we're going to highlight a couple of different models starting across the life journey. We're going to start as young as when you were a baby. How do you think about early wealth building accounts for the future, thinking about your place of employment, community assets, and then ultimately how do you retire with the right savings, investing, and be able to have a lifetime income. And so, we're not saying that ownership is the silver bullet, but it is one very tangible way that people do build wealth in this country. I think we all know the stats. The top 1% of the wealthiest people in this country own practically all of the assets. And many of their wealth is in actually places of employment and investing accounts. And so how do we make sure that it's inclusive access across the spectrum? And so I am joined by 4 amazing ladies. We have a female panel today. Yeah. And I'm just gonna quickly say their titles. Everybody has it in your apps and stuff, but we have all the way at the end, Ashwini Jambekar, who's the head of our DC strategy and business enablement for PGIM DC Solutions. PGIM is the asset management business for Prudential. Then we have Hope Wollensack, the executive director of the Georgia's Resilience and Opportunity Fund. Then we have Addie, who's the vice president of strategy and impact of Kindred Futures. And then we have Ashley Bakelmun, managing director of RW Ventures and strategic partner of Trend. And so we're going to start all the way at the youngest when you are a baby, and we're going to start with Hope. So Hope, tell us a little bit about how you got into this work. What does the Grow Fund do? And what are baby bonds in terms of helping a young person build their wealth for their lifetime?
Yeah, thank you. Glad to be here with you all today. The Grow Fund, or the Georgia Resilience and Opportunity Fund, brings to life bold, innovative, big bet solutions to help families have greater choice and agency. We do that through both addressing income inequality and wealth inequality. One of our major programs is an accelerated baby bonds pilot program. And for those of you all who may not know, I'll break down what baby bonds are. Baby bonds are the policy idea, concept, that every child should start their adult journey with sort of a nest egg on which to build their future. So under this concept, every child would receive a government-funded account seeded at birth that would be invested in capital markets over 18 or 21 years with annual deposits, hopefully progressive, so that when that when that baby reaches young adulthood, they're able to have sort of this foundation to start their life. That foundation that hopefully has benefited from time and compound interest is in somewhere near $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 that young adult can spend to start their future, including buying a home, seeding a retirement account, paying for higher education, starting a business. So it is really getting them in that ownership pipeline quite early in their adult trajectory. Our work, since this is a policy concept that exists and has not yet had a lot of real world applications, our work is that we have an accelerated program to say, hey, what does this look like in practice? What can we learn from a practical program with tangible implications? And what can we learn about how it can accelerate someone's wealth, but ultimately not just wealth for wealth's sake, because wealth in our economy means choice, agency. It means the greater ability to determine your future and freedom.
And why do you think it's so important that we start at such an early age and helping them think through what are the resources and supports that you have in place to get them to the point where they are saving and investing for their future?
Yeah. Baby bonds are one branch of early wealth building accounts, which maybe show of hands if people have heard of early wealth building accounts like 529, CSAs, of course. Okay, great. And what we know from similar type accounts is that there's, of course, the the financial benefit is very clear, but there's also a psychological benefit. Studies show that having these types of accounts and having money invested on your behalf, even if that family doesn't have their own money to save, has a ton of psychological benefits. It reduces stress, it increases hopefulness about the future, it increases future orientation and planning. So you can imagine that these types of accounts, and especially one structured like a baby bond where there's a much larger and more flexible payout, not only has the benefit of the financial side, but all of the psychological sides as well.
Great, and we've been partners with the Grow Fund since the very beginning, and we're really excited about the fact that we're going to have some of these learnings in a few years' time versus like 18 plus years with a lot of the baby bonds programs that are starting now across different states. And so we're going to leverage all of the resources to think about what are the policies that need to be in place to help people get that leg up early in life. So I'm going to turn it over to Kim now. So we're going to move up from the baby into your place of employment. And Kim, I'd love for you to talk about what is employee ownership, because I don't know how many people are familiar with employee ownership, and what does it mean to not just have an income from your place of employment, but actually have real value and ownership stake from there.
Sure. First, I'd like to just describe who Kindred is and a little bit about the work we do. Kindred is a Southern-based think and do tank that's located here in Atlanta. We focus on 9 states across the Deep South. Our goal is to build what we call collective Black wealth across the American South. The distinction there is that we are a race explicit, not race exclusive organization. And what that means is that we have an analysis for both the enabling and constricting conditions that Black people, Black communities need to thrive. We also focus on the South, where more than 55% of all Black folks live. If you were a part of the plenary earlier, Hope mentioned a stat where the racial wealth divide here in the city of Atlanta is 46-1. That has come from Kindred's research around what the racial wealth divide looks like. Also across this country, white households hold about 10 times more wealth than Black families. And so this conversation around ownership is a really important one, as you can imagine, for the work that we do. And employee ownership is one particular and really important kind of vertical in the work that we do. So simply put, employee ownership is when an employee has an equity stake in the company that they work for. Employee ownership isn't this kind of one thing, but it's a family of structures, and the vehicles will differ. For the purpose of this conversation, I will generally be talking about ESOPs, so that's employee stock option plan. It's usually a company sets up a trust where all the shares sit in this, and a savings account is set up where those shares appreciate in assets. The asset appreciates over time in that trust, right? And as long as you're an employee there, you have the benefit once you retire or leave that company. And that's very different than a paycheck, right? Employees experience compensation 3 ways, right? You get a paycheck, you might get your 401k, which is a slice of what you already make that's put into a vehicle for investment over time, and you get to take that. But ownership really is about an equity stake in a company that generally is, particularly for ESOPs, you actually don't have to put your own money in. The company does that for you. And so when you think about a stackable equity investment, employee ownership actually facilitates that. And so it's very valuable no matter where you work. And just to give you a mental model, Publix is an ESOP, right? If you think about it's a regional grocery store. So it really doesn't matter whether you are a truck driver for Publix, you're in the deli. My dad used to work at Publix. You have an ability to have equity in that company and grow over time. And for the benefit of building wealth for your family, you have that.
Great. And as you are talking, because Kim, I'd love for you to say, what are the stats of employee-owned companies in Atlanta specifically, which is why you're doing this work, which is quite small right now. But how are employee ownership companies helping their workers build their financial health, build their savings and investing to lead to greater stability and security for retirement?
Yeah, so there's kind of three buckets that I'll talk about this from. So one, employee ownership really turns the workplace into this kind of wealth building engine. Dollars go into a trust account, and it grows over time. It's not an opt-in or an opt-out, it's there for you, which is a bit different from your 401k. True story, I told my son, he's new to Salesforce. I said, baby, are you contributing to your 401k? He said, Mama, my electric bill is $400. I can't do that right now, right? And so as his mom, I'm going to push him to do it, but he has to opt in order to benefit from that. And in employee ownership, particularly an ESOP, you don't necessarily have to do it. And as long as you're at that company, that investment vehicle appreciates over time, and you get to tap into that once you retire. So that's a really important pivot. The other thing is stability. Research shows that employee-owned companies have greater stability. So when you think about environmental shocks that happen like COVID, those companies are 4 times more likely not to have turnover. Their benefits generally are better. The pay is typically higher, and this is all from the research from the National Center for Employee Ownership. So there's documented research that shows the benefits broader than just the savings vehicle, but actually a level of stability by being employed or being an owner within a company.
Great, and I'll add to a couple of other research points that Kim has shared, which is, employee-owned companies have increased revenue, better employee satisfaction, lower turnover, because employees get to come together to think about what are the benefits that they want, how do they want to think about what types of operations and processes in place. And if you ever hear or talk to an employee owner, they'll talk about how now they like getting up in the morning to go to work because they get to make decisions. Some of us were at an employee ownership convening recently, and somebody shared there about the fact that they were at a manufacturing plant, and they got pieces to make cancer machines, but they got the parts in boxes. They went through the manufacturing line, and then they boxed them again to send it out. And back in the day, they would get the boxes, throw them out, and then buy new boxes at the very end of the production line. But with this employee ownership model, they said, well, why don't we just reuse the boxes that came in at the beginning so that we're not paying so much to pay for new boxes at the back end? And the point being was, if there wasn't this employee ownership model, these employees would just be laughing at leadership at the company for spending all of that money. But because it was an employee-owned company, they were able to buy in together, to come together, to think about what are the new processes that could be put in place to help make this company more productive, which makes it so much powerful. So we're going to zoom out into the community asset space. And Ashley, I'd love for you to talk about what is the trend model, what does shared commercial real estate ownership mean, and how does it help build wealth for community residents?
Great, thanks. I'm a managing director at RW Ventures, and we're an inclusive economic development firm. We do strategic plans for regions, but we also create new enterprises when we notice a gap in the inclusive economic development ecosystem. So one such enterprise we launched is Trend. And Trend does neighborhood revitalization broadly, but the product we're going to talk about today is shared commercial real estate ownership. And Trend is addressing some stats that you probably already are aware of, but of the families that own commercial real estate, which is already a small slice, but the top 1% of those families own 81% of the value of that real estate. So it's a really exclusive opportunity that's not accessible to many people. And there's of course a racial gap as well. I think 8% of white households own commercial real estate versus 3% of black households. So Trend has created a model to allow residents of a community to invest in some of the retail shopping centers that we're purchasing. There are a number of models out there to do commercial real estate, to do shared commercial real estate ownership. One avenue is a group of residents pool their money and gather together and decide on an asset to purchase. But Trend's model is a little bit more developer-driven. Trend purchases the asset, but as we're doing the due diligence process, we crowdfund and allow community members to invest to own part of it. And the specific terms of our deals are we require a $1,000 minimum investment. It's open to any member of the community. And even outside that geography, we found that some people have been investing in shopping centers who moved away but are from the community and have ties to it. And through, we launched the offering on a crowdfunding platform. We use one called Small Change. If you go to the Small Change website, you'll see a bunch of other offerings that you could invest in. And once community members invest, we all have we're all in it together. So we have the same terms. If Trend gets dividends, the community gets paid out at the same time. And then when we sell the asset, hopefully everyone gets a return, which we project to be 3 to 5 times the initial investment. So to date, we have 460 community investors. Most of them are from the neighborhood where the shopping center is located. The investors are 70% Black, 46% women, and we also have quarterly report outs to all these investors where we gather investors, talk about how the asset is doing, but also use those as a little bit more broader financial awareness building and talking to people about a shared mission of having a stake in your community and what does it look like to own that. So the impact ends up being twofold. Number one, we're creating more community investors who have a path to wealth creation that was previously inaccessible. But alongside that, because these are physical assets that people are co-owning in their community, that people now have a voice and can give input to what sort of tenant mix might they want to see at the shopping center in the future. And people tend to be really proud that they own this and want to invest in that and see change in their community. So it also has a community impact metric as well.
And I'm sure many of you know about community land trusts or land banks. And so, Ashley, if you could just really clearly define for people how this is different than these land trusts or these neighborhood trusts, because this is about an income-producing asset, and then how it builds wealth for them over the time period of these community investors.
Yes. This is different because people are owning a specific share. In Trend's model, Trend is the majority owner, so we assemble a capital stack, and typically each deal is 10% of the equity is open for community ownership. And the community doesn't own this forever. We all own it together as long as Trend owns the asset. And when we sell it, we're hopeful for this 3 to 5 times return. We did demonstrate our first exit last year, and everyone got a 5%, a 5 times return on their initial investment, which is the higher end of what we were projecting, which was huge. And so the potential for wealth building here, I think is huge, but the little disclaimers I'll make are, number one, we do a lot of due diligence to make sure that this asset we truly think it will appreciate due to other investments surrounding the shopping center, so that people are guaranteed to make money, or hopefully guaranteed to make money from this. And also in the community ownership meetings that we have, in the investor report out meetings that we have quarterly, that we are hopeful that will also provide a sense of, to give people a sense of, like, this is something I can do. This is an accessible pathway for me to pursue. So we hope that people won't just co-own this one asset with us, but that they'll invest in other Trend shopping centers or other assets they find on the Small Change platform or elsewhere. And then collectively, that can result in huge returns and be a really meaningful way to save for retirement. And during these quarterly meetings, they're virtual, and our CEO, Lanier Richardson, was hosting one recently, and a kid that was in the room got really close to the screen and was grilling him on questions about this asset. And like, things like that are amazing. To be exposed to that pathway to ownership at such a young age, like that also is what will really generate longer term financial savings. So that's one avenue. So we hope that people will see this as something that it's truly accessible to them and pursue more real estate assets, but alongside that trend is also, we're also innovating our own model. And a couple examples are, we recently received philanthropic funding to provide a match for like the first 40 residents that invest in a shopping center, that invest $1,000, will get an extra $1,000. So that's already doubling the size of their investment, which is huge for them. And we're also exploring, there's 9 different cities that have hired us to work with them to create an inclusive ownership model. And one of the most exciting ones, I think, is in Cleveland. We're working to do this on industrial land, which is so different than the retail shopping centers that we're typically investing in. And there's a lot of vacant properties in Cleveland next to neighborhoods that have been neglected for a long time. And so now that there is going to be some type of transformative development on these parcels of land, the community should be able to benefit from the appreciation of the building that's going to go on there, which in this case is a manufacturing facility. So we're also excited to expand this beyond just retail centers to see what types of other innovative community investment vehicles we can create.
And we're very excited they're also going to be in Newark, where we are headquartered, so we're excited for that opportunity. And I should have said this at the beginning, this is kind of like mini little snippets of these different models. We are going to turn it to Ashwini for the last question, but then I'm going to turn it to you all for Q&A, so if you all want to be thinking about some of the questions on any of these models. So Ashwini, I'll turn it to you. So we've heard about different ownership pathways and how we're helping build assets and wealth for people, and how do we make sure that that turns into income when people do retire? So I'd love for you to just share, what does PGIM DC Solutions do? What kind of products do you offer first?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. So at PGIM, I'm part of a DC Solutions business, which focuses on building solutions to help people navigate their financial life. So all the way from accumulating assets, all the way into spending down those assets. Our mission is really to help the American worker achieve their retirement goals. And we do this through building innovative and personalized solutions. So our range of solutions is really vast. So we go all the way from target date funds to custom portfolios, to retirement spending portfolios, and into personalized advice through managed accounts. And with target date funds, you guys know that these are one-size-fits-all solutions, but they don't always work for everyone, right? Which is why personalized advice becomes really, really important. And that personalized advice is valuable to people throughout their lifetime. So it's not just when people are looking to retire. We believe that personalized advice is important even in the early years when people are starting to accumulate assets. So as Kim was saying, that her son is dealing with this $400 electricity bill and doesn't have money to put into her 401k, that is a problem. But there's also a solution over there. If we can provide personalized guidance that can help her son understand that he might be leaving money on the table because of the employer match, that's something that we can do to educate him and people like him, and also guide them into investing and saving early on. So that's on the accumulation side, right? And I think with asset ownership, we've heard from my fellow panelists how important asset ownership is. The next opportunity for us, I think, is to help people turn all the assets that they've earned throughout their lifetime into sustainable retirement income. If you look at two different people, they might have the same amount of wealth, right, at the time that they're looking to retire. But their situations could be completely different. One might have a very different risk tolerance. Their health profiles could be different. Their goals might be different. Their expenses in retirement might be different. So no two people should really receive the same kind of advice or guidance, or no two people should really think about it in the same way. So personalized advice and guidance is really, really powerful, and it can play a very important role. It can also help connect their real assets to, or their assets that they have, to their goals, to their situation more concretely. So I think with personalized guidance and advice, it can really help people answer all the questions that they have, and it can also help them deal with a lot of external factors that they cannot control. Most importantly, I think, personalized guidance and advice can really help people understand that they don't have to figure it out on their own. There are solutions in the market that can help. There are people that are doing really valuable work to bring those solutions to them. And so I think that can help them retire with a lot more confidence, and can really help them prepare more, feel more secure and better prepared. I talked about some of the questions that people, or challenges that people face when they're thinking about retirement. And I'll give you an example of some of the things that we do through our solutions as we're guiding them throughout their retirement journey. So early in their career, we can help them with savings and investing decisions that I already talked about. But really, during their approach to retirement, they're thinking about, when can I retire? How long should I plan for? When can I claim Social Security? How should I spend down all the assets that I own, whether it's ESOPs or their real estate investing or their 401ks, IRAs, and whatnot, right? And also, is a guaranteed income or an annuity appropriate for them? And then also, finally, the most important question, I think, is how much can I spend down in retirement? So all of these questions are really important, and people have a hard time figuring them out, but this is where personalized advice and guidance can really help them close that gap.
And what would you say, Ashwini, as people are leading up to the retirement side with the assets that they have saved, what would be some of mental blocks that you are helping them think through with some of the work that we're doing?
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, many people don't think that they have enough money saved up, or people think that they're going to live longer or they're going to live shorter. So there's just so many challenges that people face. I think a lot of them kind of start, because of all of these questions, they're not able to make decisions quickly, or they're not able to make the right kind of decisions. And so there are just too many things that they're dealing with, too many mental blocks, but there are also a lot of external factors that they're dealing with at the same time.
Great. So you can see here that we're talking about, between Hope, Kim, and Ashley, how do you accumulate, how do you grow that wealth for the residents and the workers that we all care about? And then thinking about, once they are getting closer and hit that retirement age, what's that decumulation process, and ensuring that they have enough income. So it's not just about, making sure that people are living up to the full potential in their working lives, but then post-retirement, ensuring that they have the stability and the ability to live the life that they want to post-retirement. So I'm going to now turn it to the audience to see if there are any questions for any of the panelists regarding any of the matters. Yes?
So, thank you, Sarah. So actually it's for Ashwini. Just would like to know how we are leveraging behavioral science, talking about personalized advice, how we're leveraging behavioral science as well as AI and machine learning to improve that.
Can you repeat the question?
Thank you, Dane. So the question was, how is Ashwini thinking about leveraging behavioral science and AI in helping people think about retirement savings?
Thank you. Yeah, I think over the last few years, we've seen a lot of different emerging technologies, AI being one of them. It's given us access to a lot more data, and we can use a combination of that data and technology to create better personalization at the individual level. At the same time, we talked about some of the mental blocks. We talked about, some of the other things that people have to deal with as they're thinking about retirement. And that's where behavioral science becomes really important. We've actually partnered with Duke University in order to bring those behavioral insights into the solutions that we're designing. Just to give you a simple example, with data and with personalization, with technology, we can see when someone's life situation has changed. So for example, if someone was recently married, we actually can get that data directly. Or if someone has children, we understand, we get that information directly. And that information becomes valuable because we can now prompt the person to say, hey, have you thought about updating your life insurance? Have you thought about updating your will? Have you thought about how else you might want to contribute because maybe your goals have changed as well? So there's many different ways in which we're leveraging everything together in order to create more personalized and more intuitive solutions.
And I know that question was directed at Ashwini, but I'm actually curious, do any of you all leverage behavioral science or AI or think about how it's going to impact some of your models? No?
No, so the thought came, especially when it comes to our finances. There's such a psychology attached to it, and I know we want to leverage AI. And I know we all know this, it can't be in the absence of human touch and follow up, and we just learned across the years in particularly communities of color, that just requires a lot more, and technology is like an added layer to something that's already hard. And I think a lot of times we think it could be the silver bullet to help accelerate or move. We just have to remember that it has to be, and I know we know this, but it's been such an increase in AI and technologies and platforms, and we can get lost in that. But the true work is really the engagement. I'm gonna drag my son to make sure he invests, right? But technology.
Yeah, and I think there's so many interesting applications for how technology could be better leveraged. I also wanted to bring into the conversation, I shared some of my remarks on the psychological benefits of a baby bond or early wealth building accounts. But what we primarily see is these gaps are not primarily driven by behavior differences. We see really similar savings rates across demographic groups when they have access to the same income and capital. What we are sort of up against, and so behavior changes can be an important component to consider, but what we should be fundamentally asking are sort of, in our economy, wealth begets wealth, ownership begets ownership, and so this is why we see the accumulation at the top 1% because of these trends. And so I love the idea of what are the on-ramps to ownership, whether that's collective ownership or individual ownership, that put sort of resources behind it. And so, whether that's externally funded, our program is sort of an externally funded baby bond account, or there are externally funded ways for people to sort of get in the game. And then I think we can optimize once folks have once folks are in the game and have something that they're playing with in the game, then I think we can sort of further optimize from there. But the psychological benefit is one thing and behavior optimization is one thing, but the actual tangible resources behind it and what data show us about, across demographic groups, when you calibrate for income, people's spending and savings are really the same. This is one thing that actually differentiates a baby bond from, let's say, a CSA or 529. Those things are primarily targeted at changing savings behavior, but we know very low income families actually don't have the excess income to save, and that's what we're up against. It's someone doesn't have the $100 extra at 25 to be putting in their retirement account for it to be $1 million at 65, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I'll just add, and please, if there's any other questions, raise your hands, which is, we're thinking about behavioral science across all of these ownership models because it's a shift in mentality and culture, whether you're talking about in a community or in a workplace or an individual, about what does it mean to own an asset? What does it mean to understand that you now have a say in some of these things? But also in your own investing. We know through research that we've done with Aspen Institute and Morningstar and DCIA that people's retirement accounts, depending on your gender or your ethnicity, can determine how high risk or low risk your investment strategies are. And that really determines the account value. We know across multiple companies, we submitted our data across, I think there's about 20 companies that are in this study. No matter the level of seniority or the tenure, Black women and Latino women have the lowest account values in their retirement accounts than any other gender, and this is going across all the multiple data. So that behavioral shift on how we think about things is incredibly important. And then I'll say, we are also thinking about how AI plays into this ownership piece, right? Which is that we all don't know what the jobs are going to look like in many years, but how do we ensure, at least in their communities, in their individual lives, and then hopefully in their place of employment, that they have that ownership right to it. So I know I saw a couple hands. Yes, go ahead.
Grab your mic. Yeah. Great. Hey, everybody. So my question is for you, Ashley, and your investment model is really unique, and I'd be curious to see what you've been successful with in educating folks in the community and also building trust with them. That's been a theme throughout this, and how you've kind of brought them along in the process.
I think one of the ways the community engagement and outreach before people invest, like we run a lot of those sessions, and Lanier, our CEO, has done them in church basements, in barbershops, some virtually, with community partners. Like we spend a lot of time in the neighborhood getting to know partners, and then truly walk people through what this deal looks like in layman's terms. Like if you've not been exposed to this before, like what is this? Because the only reason people invest with Trend is because they trust Trend. So building that trust piece is really important, and maybe one of the I guess trust success stories is for one of the shopping centers we own in Baltimore. One of the investors came up to Lanier afterwards and said, I used to do crime at this shopping center, and now I own it. So I really I really care what happens there, and people. So people want to, I think we have seen people really care, and I think even walking into it, we're met with distrust initially because we're investing in low to moderate income communities, and history has told these community members that the developer will not have their best interests in mind. So it takes a lot of meetings and sessions, but once that trust is developed, like I've seen people they're so excited that they actually have a say in what they might want to see in their community. And we had a big event in Baltimore at one of the shopping centers, and I shouldn't be shocked because we put in the work, but there were so many people there. It was a huge party, and people were thrilled. They were taking pictures and posting them with them in their shopping center. So I think, does that answer your question? But yeah, so we've seen little success stories like that.
Hope, I'm actually wondering if you could also answer that question about trust.
Yeah, we think about this a lot at the Grow Fund, and when we build our programs, we really design them with community, not just for community. And so we think about how we're designing programs at the outset that are reflective of what communities are telling us they need. The organization was actually started out of a community task force here in Atlanta in Dr. King's childhood neighborhood. That's the site of pretty deep inequality today. And what we do, some of the practices throughout our program, is that at the outset, when we were asking people, what do you need? What's going to turn the tide on your financial situation? What we heard is that it just didn't add up. There was plenty of financial programs people could access, but there was a shortfall of cash every month. And how can you really be accessing these programs when you have a shortfall of cash month after month? And so this is where the concept of one of our income support programs, In Her Hands, came from. It provides a cash stipend monthly, a guaranteed income to mostly women across Georgia. And throughout our programs, and as we've iterated and developed and launched more programs, we've continued to have a community advisory group that meets monthly. China is here, who leads that work, that meets monthly to quarterly to hear feedback on the program, what we're doing right, what future iterations of the program can look like, so this real monitoring aspect that can inform our future work. We started with sort of the income support and income building side of our work, and then we heard from community members, income alone is not enough, which data also supports, 100% true, and they pushed us on that. And this is where the idea for our other flagship program, the one I described earlier, came from, where folks in that program are receiving both that income support and the investable sum, the quote-unquote baby bond. And that really came from listening to the voice of our participants. So with each iteration of our programs, we're both taking what we know about the policy landscape, what data tells us, and listening to community voices. And more often than not, the community voices are telling us what the data already shows. And so it's a really important component to us, and we're continuously thinking about how communities can be driving solutions and are experts on their communities, not just sort of recipients of a program.
Great. Is there another question? Yeah. I don't think I can jump down.
Bahari Harris from Truist. I have a question for Ashley. And it has to do with this model. I'm really intrigued by the model because many times communities feel at the mercy of the developer, right? And in the communities that you described, it also becomes a gateway for gentrification to happen. And so I'm wondering, how do you identify the communities? How can they welcome you in, right? Because many times these communities tend to be very active at the civic level, right? They'll go to a city council meeting, they'll complain, they'll go to the meetings that the developer has, where it's like the listening session that they're not really going to listen to. But so I'm just wondering, from your perspective, how do you actually bring in these communities from the very beginning, identify the communities and what will work proximate to the shopping centers that are next to their communities?
Thanks. So at the outset, we have a bunch of data analytics that we could run that kind of tell us like what are the trends in each neighborhood, and that maybe helps ground us, but that's definitely not going to get us invited into the community. And so what the short answer to your question is partnerships. We know we're an outsider to this, not to some cities. We are based in Chicago, but so if we are, we get to know the local partners and the respected community development institutions and trust their recommendation, especially in looking for a neighborhood in a shopping center. And those partners have pointed us in the direction of like, hey, this shopping center, residents want to see something different here. They aren't happy with the current owner. So it's conversations like that that help us really hone in on what's the right neighborhood. Then after that, we do, as part of the, when we launch the offering on the Small Change platform, we have to upload a bunch of documents, and it comes with a business plan, but that business plan then is a combination of data and storytelling, but it's essentially our due diligence document that says this is what we've heard, what people want. This is where the future that we see and where this could go. These are other investments that are happening around the neighborhood. Like, that's important too, to make sure the asset will appreciate. But then I also heard your comment about gentrification, and so like I said, there's a twofold response to that. Number one, like the neighborhoods we're looking at are on the cusp of change, so that means might gentrify. And there's a whole lot of other programs that should be in place, like home ownership strategies, et cetera, to truly help residents. But the piece that we believe is really important is if the neighborhood is at a point where it might gentrify, that makes it all the more important for people to own this asset, because otherwise development will happen to them. And it does take a lot of conversations to build that trust that we actually mean it, but that's essentially how our process works.
Okay, here we go. We have less than a minute left, so I have one last closing question, and if you have any questions, feel free to come up to any of the panelists. If there's one thing that you could advise a leader in business, finance, or policy to do to ensure that asset ownership leads to a secure retirement, what would it be? And we can popcorn or go straight down the line. Okay,
I guess I'll start. I think I'd encourage just creative thinking. We broadly want to democratize ownership to real estate, but that doesn't happen when you accept the status quo, that this is how it's always been done. And even in some of the sites we're looking at, some of the industrial sites we're looking at now, that does take, there might not be a model for how to create shared ownership, but so I just encourage creativity and innovation.
I would just say to treat ownership as community wealth building infrastructure. For so long, we have looked at opt-in models, and we have to really think about the infrastructure so people don't really have to think about it. So that would be my advice. Thoughts?
My thoughts, start somewhere. Like, we don't have to be finding like the silver bullet. Start somewhere. There's so many different models. Like, pursue one that's directionally right for your institution, your company, whatever it is, and like your neighborhood. Start somewhere, and that like there are lots of different on-roads and pathways to get there.
I would say that we need to move from thinking about retirement as a single event and move from a more accumulation-only mindset to a more retirement income and outcomes-oriented mindset. True success, or the measure of true success should not be just how many assets you own or how much wealth you have. It should be whether or not you feel you can retire with confidence. And to retire with confidence, I believe that personalized advice and guidance should be accessible to everyone. It doesn't matter how much money you have, how many assets you have.
Great. Well, thank you so much to all four amazing ladies here, and feel free to come up with any questions.